Welcome to another episode of the Pierce Brothers. I'm Joe, and today we're going to be talking about pistol red dot optics and what the best choice is on the market. Before we get started, go check out our Patreon. We appreciate all the support you guys give us. Without you guys, it wouldn't be possible to do this channel, and we're really working to grow the channel, so please share, like, comment, subscribe, all the usual stuff. So to get started, we've done a series of torture tests on optics over the last month or so, and we have more planned. But we wanted to share some of my thoughts on what the best optic is out there, in my opinion, and then how well these optics have all held up in torture tests, and kind of the pros and cons of open versus enclosed, and some of the price point versus expensive and how well they've done. So to start off, let's talk about enclosed versus open optic. So we've got an enclosed one here, the Holosun EPS. We have an open one. I got a bunch of open ones here, but we also tortured an Aimpoint ACRO P2, the newer version, and that's kind of what brought on this whole series of tests, is because I wanted to find the best optic that I could, the most durable, the toughest, that I could put on a handgun as my main go-to gun for, let's say, an end of the world scenario. But in reality, it's just because I want something on my gun that's not going to fail me and that's going to be reliable and that I can count on when I need it to be there, especially if I'm out and about in the hills, whatever, if it's a self-defense scenario, home defense, you name it. I want it to be reliable and functional. So we started that torture test with the Aimpoint ACRO, like I said, and it actually failed early on, which I was actually really surprised about. And what happened was, go watch the video if you haven't, but we dropped it, and that enclosed optic, we broke the seal, and we didn't realize it. We threw it in the water for the water test. It didn't lose zero though. We shot it after dropping it, put it in the water, shot it again, and it was fine. It still held zero, but we had got water inside the optic at that point, and we could no longer see the dot and shoot on target. And because it was an enclosed optic, we couldn't wipe the water or blow the water out and still see our iron sights. We couldn't even see our iron sights at all. It was so fogged up. So when an enclosed optic fails, you lose your iron sights, you lose the dot, you're pretty much out of the water. You can't use that gun anymore. It's no longer functional unless you pull that dot off and then use your irons. So that was a big point that we learned from that test. So the next test we did was on the Trijicon RMR. Go watch that torture test if you haven't already. And it performed very well. We were really surprised. Well, not surprised. I was satisfied, I'll say, because I expected it to do very well. The RMR is the military's optic that they use for their handgun dots, even though not everybody uses a dot in the military. But that is their optic of choice. Now, it performed well. It made it through the drop, water, mud, dragging, and it did just fine. And that open optic, something that was great is that, okay, mud, water, whatever gets in there, we could blow it out, wipe it out, and all of that. Now, with that test, I didn't want to just wash the mud off. I wiped the mud away and blew it out enough that I could see the dot, because you're not always going to have a bucket of water or a river or a water bottle to wash off that mud. And I wanted to see how hard it would be to clean that off without having that water source to clean it. And we were able to get it cleaned off enough fairly quickly just by blowing out and wiping it off to see the dot. After a couple of shots, that mud pretty much flung off of the optic, and we were able to continue and just shoot like normal. It was still muddy and visibility was a little low, but it functioned and did great. And that exact same thing happened with the Vortex Defender. Now, the Vortex Defender shifted point of impact by a couple of inches windage wise, not elevation wise. So the Defender is about $300, whereas the RMR is about $600 after tax and whatever. So almost half the price. I wouldn't say a full half price, but pretty dang close. And it did very, very well. We were actually very surprised. The biggest difference between these two is that they both claim to be fog proof or anti-fog proof, whatever. The RMR was very fog proof, I'll say. It was cold that day. We had water on it, the mud. We blew on it and it would fog for a second from blowing on it, and that fog would clear away and we'd be able to shoot and have good visibility. With the Vortex Defender, it is less fog proof, I'll say, than the RMR. would blow on it, clean it off, and it would stay fogged longer, and I'd have to wipe it a little more to get better visibility. So that extra price point, in my opinion, is 100% worth it. Now, those are really optics in two different categories though. So you have your high-end, probably one of the most expensive. Of course, there's the RMR HD now, but the regular RMR held up very well. So in my opinion, I don't really need that HD, but might grab one at some point. But you look at this and it's an entry-level Vortex Defender versus the RMR. And that really decided my opinion for me, that the Vortex Defender is my entry-level pick for an optic. It was the optic of the year in 2024. This is the Gen 2, so to say, of that Vortex red dot versions. In the Gen 2s, they have auto shut off within 10 minutes. They have all the updated features, a faster refresh rate, so it's a better optic, and just generally better than the first models they released. So they do these in a couple different sizes. They have the Defender CCW, which has the RMSC footprint. Great footprint for all of your kind of smaller, subcompact style guns. I use and carry this one frequently on my EDC gun. This is my P365 Fuse. And then I have this one on an M&P Compact. So two different sizes. They make a third size, which is huge. That one's the XL. This is the ST and then the CCW. So those are the two I have. Great optics though for the money. So that is my budget price point pick for an optic. If you have the extra money though, I would highly recommend the RMR just because of the extra fog proof, and it did not shift zero at all. It held its aim, it held its point of impact perfectly throughout the test. Now I think the reason for that is that the Defender, the windage adjustment screw is on the side, and as we were dragging that gun, that windage screw, I guess their adjustment screws in general, stick out just a little bit, whereas on the RMR they are flush. I'd prefer that they were recessed a little bit just for extra protection, but flush, we didn't have any issue with that point of impact shifting. So having these on the Defender, they stick out just a little bit, and I think dragging it through the mud is what bumped that adjustment screw to where it shifted our point of impact to the left a little bit. But again, for the price point you pay, right around $300, excellent choice for the money, in my opinion. It held up very well in the torture tests, and that really says it all. You know, you can sit there and claim like, oh yeah, they're not as good. Well, their fog proof wasn't as good, shifted impact a little bit, but did not break, still functioned. We could still get hits on a 10-inch gong at 10 yards. So you're still getting hits on target, just not dead center target. But that being said, my number one pick is the RMR. It's the best optic, in my opinion, on the market. It beat out the Aimpoint ACRO because the ACRO failed, bottom line, in the torture test. We couldn't even finish the torture test because it failed so early on. That being said, an enclosed optic is great as long as you do not break the seal. They have all that, because they're enclosed, you can wipe water, mud, moisture off really easily, and you're back in business. But if that seal gets broken, you're sunk, like what happened to us in the torture test. And dropping that gun on steel, or that optic, obviously you're not going to encounter steel everywhere, but that could be any number of things, hitting, bumping, whatever. If that glass gets cracked, you're done. So that is why I chose an open optic, because we were able to clear it out. We were able to clean off the glass enough to get shots on target pretty quickly. It didn't take much effort to get the mud out of there to get that red dot visible again. So those are my thoughts. Now, Holosun, my one concern with Holosun, most of their optics have these solar panels on the top. Now, when we torture test this, we'll find out for sure, but price point wise, these are more than the Vortex Defender. So they're a little more, but I think that when you drop that solar panel on steel, my opinion is that it's probably going to fail. Whether it breaks and destroys the optic, because it does run on battery as well, so you'll still have that battery, but your battery life will probably be impacted from that. But we'll find out. But again, you know, Holosun, I have kind of a, they don't look as cool. I like the look of the Vortex Defender a lot more. The Holosun, they're great, you'd hope, but we'll find out when we torture it. So that's really, you know, the Vortex Defender is cheaper, it held up, and it was very durable and made it through that torture test, and for that reason I have to give that as my #1 pick. If you don't like the Vortex, then I would recommend the Holosun. Now, one other optic out there on the market I wanted to mention was the EOTech eFlex. EOTech makes some really great stuff. The biggest problem I have with the eFlex is battery life is a little low. Auto shut off, if you turn it on in auto shut off mode, is like 14 hours. So not great. I mean, that's kind of the same problem that Vortex had initially with that dot they released, was that it had like a 12 or 14 hour shutoff time, which is dumb. These newer versions have a 10-minute shutoff time. So that auto shut off, in my opinion, is a must, but we'll probably still torture an EOTech eFlex at some point. That being said, I have a lot of rounds through this with 10mm and 45 ACP both, and it's functioned great. You know, if you were going to put this on a 10mm handgun for a mountain gun or something like that, that would be a great choice for that, because when you're done hunting, you're going to turn it off, put it away. And that dot, you get a nice large field of view, a nice large window, and held zero very well with shooting a lot of 10mm through that. So that was, I think we did almost 1,500 rounds of 10mm on this gun, on this optic, and it did great. We then moved it here to the FN 545, and we're well past 1,000 rounds now with that, and it's performed flawless. So great option there. Just does not have auto shut off, nor does it have auto adjust brightness. Now, a note I want to make with auto adjust brightness, which is a great feature, if you're going to have an auto adjust brightness red dot on a handgun that you're going to use in low light situations with a pistol mounted or a weapon mounted light, you want to make sure that you turn off the auto adjust brightness, because when you are shooting and it's dark, you turn on your light, suddenly your target is in the light, but your optic is still back here in the dark. So that dot is going to be really dim, and you're not going to be able to see it as well on the target that's now in the light. So make sure that if you have a weapon mounted light with a red dot on your home defense gun or on a gun that you're going to use in low light scenarios, that you practice with that and figure out what brightness setting you need to have that optic on in order to see it when your light is deployed. So that's and very important, you know, because if you're just going to throw a light on your concealed carry gun, throw it up for your home defense gun at night, you got to make sure that you turn off auto adjust brightness and make it bright enough that you can see that dot in the dark with your light on. So yeah, that's just one note I wanted to make. So, and that could go for anything, you know, if you're going out in the dark, if you're on duty, whatever it be, make sure you've trained and used that red dot with your weapon mounted light to know how it works and what that brightness setting is that you need. Now, last point I want to make is optics cuts. So most modern pistols come with an optics cut from the factory, and that's great because they have all the different plates. You can swap between different optics. One downside to that is usually that'll mount the optic a little bit high, and it will change your grip angle just a little bit to where it's not as natural of a grip angle when you're shooting. And that's fine because you can practice and get used to it. But if you want to have an optic cut and cut it specifically for a certain red dot, what that does is that dot will mount directly to the slide without having to have any adapters or plates. So that optic will sit lower and create a more natural grip angle. It'll also allow you to co-witness with your regular sights, or almost co-witness, kind of depending on what sights you have, but it helps get that grip angle more natural, and it has a more firm, better mount because there's less parts and adapters and pieces that have to go in there to hold that optic on. So in my opinion, that's a great option. The only downside to that is it will limit what optics you can put on there, because you'll have a specific footprint that you have it cut for. The Glock store will cut those for you. So if you have a Glock slide that you want to get cut for a certain optic, go to the Glock store, They have a spot on there. You can fill out your information. You can purchase that package. They have a 10-day turnaround. So that's a great choice if you're wanting to mount a pistol dot, or just cut your slide or recut it from the factory setting to a specific dot and lower that mounting height. So that really covers, I think, the handgun red dot world. Some big benefits of a handgun or a red dot mounted handgun with a red dot mounted on it is that you'll have faster target acquisition, faster follow-up shots, you can be more accurate, and you can get that dot sighted in specifically to your load. Because a lot of guns on the market, most semi-auto pistols don't have adjustable sights, so you could put adjustable sights on there to get that sighted into your defense load. I prefer a red dot, and yeah, I like a red dot. I'm kind of that modern tactical kind of mode, but yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. So number one pick for red dot for me is the Trijicon RMR, like I said, and the reasons I said. Originally I thought it would be the Aimpoint ACRO, that's why I bought that first, but it didn't pass the torture test, so we went to the RMR next, and that is where I'll stay. Now, if you cannot afford the RMR, like I said, Vortex Defender, great option. Holosun makes some great optics, but we'll test those here and do a torture test on them and see how well they hold up. But if there's another dot you want to see us do a torture test on, throw that in the comments. We appreciate you guys. Thank you for watching. Make sure to share, subscribe, and stay tuned for more great content.